The Trump administration has, quote, put Iran on notice. And it looks like new economic sanctions on that country will be forthcoming. The left, again, doesn't like that. An editorial in the LA Times today criticized President Trump for saber-rattling with Iran. But it's clear that the soft approach President Obama took to confronting terrorism is now being completely reversed by the Trump administration. Apparently, President Trump had a rough conversation with Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull. According to the Washington Post, Mr. Trump thinks that President Obama's deal to accept 1,250 refugees from an Australian detention center is bad for the USA. However, the White House now says the deal will go through. But it's clear President Trump is a confrontational guy on terrorism. The refugee problem all over the world will not settle down until America and NATO begin establishing or reestablishing world order. Ironically, the left doesn't want that either. In fact, the liberal community worldwide opposes any and all aggressive action against terrorism or any and all intrusion into chaotic nations where the refugee problem is exploding. So on the left, there is no solution, none. They simply accept the jihad and the chaotic world that stems from it. Believe me, Donald Trump is not going to brook that. And that's a memo. Now the top story reaction. Joining us from Washington, Nile Gardiner from the Heritage Foundation, and Jillian Turner, Fox News analyst. So, Jillian, where am I going wrong here?
I don't think you're going wrong, but one thing I would fire back at you real quick is that if this refugee and immigration to EO is sort of the first step in taking a hardline approach to terrorism, where's the plan from the Trump administration to combat terrorism, right? I mean, clearly this is part of some larger plan, according to that logic. So why doesn't the plan come first, and then we take steps to remedy the wrong?
He's only been there 2 weeks. So you would assume that once he's got his guys in place, you know, and that's taking longer than he expected, there would be a plan. I agree with you. There's got to be an overall plan. Now, how much of it is announced, Jillian, that's another story. I mean, because you don't want to put the enemy on notice that you're going to do A to B. But it looks to me that there's a certain logic in the 7 nations that have been frozen for 90 days because those nations don't have any control over who moves in and out of those countries. None. Zero. And that's why they were selected. So why is that policy bad for America? Why?
I think this policy is bad for America because I think that over the medium to maybe the little bit longer term, it's going to have actually the reverse consequences of what the administration intends. So what we have to do in order to defeat ISIS, defeat radical Islam, is overcome them not just militarily but ideologically. So in order to do that, we can't alienate the 1 billion Muslims around the world, right? We can't unilaterally defeat them.
I think any Muslim who's alienated by the United States trying to protect our own people is... Yeah, I don't even care if they're alienated, I have to tell you. Look, if you can, and this is to you, Mr. Gardner, if you can get on a plane in Tripoli, Libya, all right? Anybody can get on a plane. There's no government in place, no one checking anything. So the worst terrorists in the world can get on a plane in Tripoli, fly to Paris, change planes, and then land in JFK 8 hours later. All right? That's what this refugee thing is designed to stop, is it not?
Well, I think this executive order is designed to protect the American people, to make America safer, and to save American lives. If you look at what's happened in Europe with a huge refugee influx there, thanks to Angela Merkel's disastrous open borders policy, Europe has a massive security problem. Several individuals who took part in the Paris attacks in November 2015, for example, came in under the guise of being migrants. And there's no doubt about it. ISIS is using the refugee flow in order to infiltrate Europe. It will attempt to infiltrate the United States as well. And so this is a forward-looking policy designed to preempt action by ISIS here in the United States.
And I understand that theory, but Jillian puts forth, and she's certainly not alone, that by selecting these 7 nations, all predominantly Muslim, that the other Muslims who may not be, you know, militants, but maybe in the middle, will hate the United States or pull away from the USA because you know the propaganda that's being put out. This is anti-Muslim, it's anti-immigrant. The left is all over this. So is there any validity to Jillian's point there?
I don't buy the argument that this executive order is going to alienate 1 billion Muslims. It's specifically targeted at specific countries known to be war zones, places where Islamists are operating. And I think that this is not aimed at the entire Muslim world. And with regard to ISIS, the argument is that ISIS will use this as propaganda against the United States. Well, ISIS is going to be committed all the time to killing Americans, regardless of executive orders. And I think it's only right that the United States is defending itself.
I have to interject.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I think the way that what I'm saying is being characterized, Nile, is just a little bit off. I'm not making the argument that this is a rallying cry for Muslims to radicalize and join ISIS. I'm making the point that some of the countries that are on this list, we actually need their help in fighting ISIS. And they're now so angry at the United States over this ban.
What country would that be?
You could arguably make the case that we need all of them, right? Iraq, for one. I would start with Iraq.
Yemen, Somalia, we don't need them at all. They're trouble spots that are out of all of these governments. Trouble spots doesn't
mean that we don't need certain kinds of cooperation from their government, right? In Somalia, we're looking at...
But Jillian, if you're going to not take action in places that are just chaotic with no central government at all, if you're going to not take any action there to try to supervise who comes in from those countries, that's a policy that Mr. Obama embraced.
There's a difference between this ban and not taking any action, right? I would also argue that, with all due respect to Mr. Gardiner and the UK, we're not Europe. We've got really stringent requirements and practices already in place in this country. That's why we don't have the European problem.
Well, the president wants to toughen it up, and I think, look, you got to give him 90 days to vet it, because the Obama administration absolutely didn't do anything. All right, good debate, you guys. We appreciate it. Next on the rundown, the emergence of Governor Chris Christie. Where's he been? And why is he not working